Welcome back to AP Family and Divorce Law Podcast and the show where we have real conversations about surviving and thriving through separation, divorce, co-parenting, and high conflict relationships. So today's episode is a must listen for anyone that's dealing with a difficult or even abusive ex because let's face it, communicating with your former partner can feel like walking through the Google minefield really blindfolded, and sometimes your mental health is literally on the line. So I'm joined by someone that's been there and didn't just get it back. She's back with the blueprint. So my guest is Lisa Johnson. She's a co-founder of Been There, Got Out. She's a high conflict divorce strategist, a certified domestic violence advocate, and an author of Been There, Got Out, Toxic Relationships, High Conflict Divorce, and How to Stay Sane Under Insane Circumstances. And, Lisa represented herself through a grueling multi-state legal battle and helped pass a new domestic violence legislation in Connecticut. So you couldn't hear it from anyone better. So she had to navigate the legal system as a self-represented person, create a precedent, and she, was up against the narcissistic, manipulating, and, coercive controlling act. So in this episode, we'll dive into how communication can be weaponized against you in court, what to say or avoid saying so you don't sabotage your own case, right, Lisa? And the tools and boundaries that can help you stay calm, credible, and legally protected, and really what it takes to keep your sanity through it all. So, Lisa, you've been there, you got out, and you're back here to help people. And let's jump right into it. So, tell us just a little bit about your story.
Yeah, so I was with my ex for 20 years, nearly half my life, and I never expected to get a divorce. And you can imagine what led to that, but I kind of plotted my exit for 2 years. And then the first time I met with a divorce attorney, he told me, yours is going to be really bad. And I didn't believe it because I thought my ex was a good person, but had just done some bad things. The lawyer was right. The divorce ended up taking a year and costing $100,000. And then there were a total of 10 years in the legal system still dealing with another of my lawyer's perfect predictions. And that was that my ex was not going to comply with our agreement and that I would have to go on my own or pro se or self-represented litigant, because if I continued with a lawyer, my ex would decimate me financially in the system. And I always say I'm paying back those divorce loans forever. So my lawyer basically became my best friend for that year. He
Oh,
was paid a lot for it, but he was wonderful. And he gave
yeah.
me some ideas of how to get ready to go back myself and be more effective. And one of them was to have a really strong paper trail. And he told me to do
Okay.
things that I didn't feel comfortable with. And that's something we often do with our clients because even though he's from Connecticut, I'm a New Yorker, and we call it the harsh New York reality check. And so, for example, my kids were still in high school, and my lawyer said, you need to make sure you communicate with your ex effectively and you involve him in the college process. You can't just go off and decide whatever you want. And I said, well, why not? I have final say. And he hasn't been involved in the past couple of years. And the lawyer said, that's going to look bad for you. And so, using his ideas and just
That's
what I learned
good.
along the way, and then my background as a high school English teacher and professional writer, I realized how important it is to have that paper trail and to communicate effectively with your ex, because we always say you're writing to that person, but there's always that invisible audience in the background that you have to consider.
Wow, no, that is definitely spot on because I was thinking like, what is the one big, communication lesson that you learned early on? And I would say you just said a big one right there, right? There is that it's not just the other person. You have to think about the audience. What happens when a judge receives, you know, looks at this email or a mediator or whatever, another third party, how is it presented, right?
Yeah, and a lot of times one of the mistakes that people make is, of course, they're emotional, righteously so, but they do what we call popping off in their communications in writing. And then the case is already looked at as high conflict, and then you look like part of the problem. So it's really important to rein yourself in. And especially if you have children, you always want to present as the best co-parent ever. And so when we teach something called strategic communication, we talk about how important it is to document your ex's patterns of behavior over time and the impact it has on your children and on your relationship with your children in particular, because we know another big thing they try to do is turn the kids against you post separation. So people sometimes
Yeah.
think, oh, my ex did this one thing and now I'm going to nail them. That's not how it works. The
Mhm.
courts, and you know this obviously, Angela, that the courts want to see patterns of what someone's doing, not just a single thing here or there, unless it's really, really powerful.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. The one that bothers me a lot is where it looks like one party is, so the ex writes a message and it looks, on the surface of it, it looks just, friendly and cooperative. And but there's a trigger in there because when I see a client's response, it's almost like, well, they were just being nice. They wanted to co-parent, but you and I know that it's obviously not like that. But that's what it would look like to a third party. Can you speak about that a little bit? Because I'm sure you see a lot of that in the work that you do.
Oh yeah. And my son actually, who's in his 20s, just taught me the term rage baiting. I hadn't heard that before. It's
Hmm.
when somebody
Great
says
dating.
something,
Yeah.
right? And you can imagine what that means. They'll say
Yeah.
something that triggers you that other people don't necessarily think is that bad. And so with a lot of people
Yeah.
who are covert in their abuse is they'll say those things knowing that it's going to set you off. I can't remember exactly what was going on. I think it was something with a parenting plan schedule that wasn't being followed with one of our clients recently. And the ex wrote, "Oh, and happy Mother's Day," even though they kept the kid for longer than they should. It was like a dig.
Oh,
So from the outside, it
yeah.
looks like someone's being super friendly. You know, they're just saying happy Mother's Day or happy birthday, but it's like they know that they're doing and it's hurting you, especially if they have the kid. It's almost like highlighting how you don't have your child with you, knowing that that's what matters the most to you. So
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
digs for you to, answer and pop off yourself and of course look bad. So we often tell our clients that once this relationship has ended, your ex is very limited to the ways they still can get at you. And we say money, kids, and the court are the main three.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
we also remind them that what matters most is your attention, and not your positive attention but your negative attention, because if they can say things to you to still get you to respond, it shows they still have that power over you. And that's why it's so important to realize the strategy that they're doing to still get at you. They just want you to show them that you care about them, even if it's through anger. And so we really have to make people aware that any kind of answer, and I'm not talking about that you never communicate, because obviously you have to,
Yeah.
but when
I'm trying
they're
to say, how do you
poking,
deal with that, right?
yeah, the
When you need
poking.
to co-parent and you need to how do you deal with that? Because you have to communicate with them somehow, their children, for example, involved in the situation.
Yeah. So I don't know if you've ever heard of the system called BIF by Bill Eddy. He's like one of the
Yes.
communication experts. We love him. He's one of our gurus. And that basically stands for brief, informative, factual, and friendly, or firm, depending on what you believe, or both. We came up with this system. It's actually called FRAC, and
Right.
it's more
Okay.
specific with
Yeah.
how to structure a communication, but it's an art form. So you don't use all of the pieces, but it's basically starting with a fact, then getting into an expression of emotion that is not concern, where it's more confusion that something happened. And then something called the universal agreement, or an anchor that you both agree on that matches the values of the court. And then following up with an invitation to cooperate or collaborate. And this is like very, surface level, because this is such an in-depth topic. It's actually what we do more than anything with all of our clients, whether they're early in the process, middle, which most of them are because these things last for so long, and just through co-parenting, because it's you have
Yeah.
to continue, like you said, communicating with the co-parent, because you are sharing custody, you're sharing these children, and the courts as well as the world expect you to figure it out somehow. And
Yeah.
it's
No.
hard. It's hard when this person has taken advantage of you. They've been cruel to you. Now they're being cruel to your children, and you still have to look like you're doing the best you can to try to work with them. And there's a lot of ways to do it very effectively, but it feels extremely triggering. Most of our clients have PTSD, and getting a little ding in their inbox sets it off,
Yeah.
where it's like, oh my gosh, what's it going to be now? And they live with this constant sense of dread that every message is going to be a bomb. Now you're going to file something else in court. What are you threatening to about, saying how I'm an unfit parent, or that you're going to take away support, or just something? It's like you always expect the worst to happen. And then the opposite, when it's silent for a while, that's even scarier, because it's like, what's going on? Why aren't they terrorizing
Yeah.
me?
Yeah. No, it is. I mean, it's very well said, Lisa, because those are all kind of valid emotions, and I recognize that when we're dealing with clients. I literally had a call with a client this morning, and I understood that, from a legal perspective, the concerns didn't even seem reasonable or valid. But she was in her relationship for 25 years. I'm like, I'm
Hmm.
going to defer to you. So you know what you said. I'm like, I don't see the angle. And it's always trying to find that fine line, because the concern is also, the concern that they're going to drag you through the entire legal process. So while I might hear and understand you, sometimes I would rather they work with someone else, because the tools that I can use as a lawyer to maybe get you, help might be the same tools, or to get you a solution could just be exactly what the other party needs to kind of just, bring you down even more. So sometimes, the healing may have to come from you, and you may have to now, I hate to use the word play their game, but it's sometimes that's what you have to do, right? Because
Yeah.
you can, the system, yes, it's there, but yes, you could get to a judge. But like in Ontario, for example, you would have, there are multiple conferences. It could be a motion. Then, like in your case, you get successful. Then they don't follow the order, and it's just constant. At some point, you need to do things differently. And I think communication is great. But Lisa, I want you to talk about the work that you do, because I don't think I've kind of set that up yet. And someone's probably wondering, well, Lisa has all of these great ideas. Well, how does it work for me? So could you, if you could share kind of the way you work with clients that are going through these
Yeah, well,
issues.
I want to comment on what you just said in terms of what you do versus what I do, because people often say, are you a lawyer? And I say, no, I kind of fill the gap between what attorneys are generally not trained to do and therapists don't quite understand. So, an attorney's job obviously is to be your client's ally and advocate, but to translate their case into the law and make a strong case, and then be done with it. And just this morning, one of our clients got in touch. We've seen her for quite a while, and she she has a history of popping off. She's hysterically funny, but her ex is one of those like career people in court. So we always have to rein her in and say, you gotta not lose yourself in the communication. But she said at the end of the conversation, I could ask my lawyer, but he's all business. But with you, I get the cream and sugar with my coffee. And so I think so
Like
lawyers
that, the
like,
cream and sugar.
yeah. So lawyers like you, that, you have your lane that you operate in, and you have lots of clients, and everybody has their needs. And with clients like ours, because they've been in these abusive relationships, that sometimes they feel like if a lawyer doesn't communicate immediately, that they're being ignored, they're being given the silent treatment, and it's triggering them because it's similar behavior to their ex, even though the reason is completely different. And so we often focus on how important it is to take a team approach to clients with high conflict cases. So the lawyer is what we talk about, like the surface of a table. And this is actually in our first book. Where the more support you have, the more sturdy and stable you can be. So the lawyer's one leg. Again, your job is to translate the case into the law. then a therapist's job is to help you heal, but they often don't understand the dynamics of family court. And sometimes therapists give really bad legal advice, and it's very frightening. So then people who have not been isolated, who are lucky, may have friends and family who support them and who love them, but often we call it barstool counsel. Like they'll say, oh, well, this is what my friend did or what I did, and it's not the same as your case. And so even though they care for you, it's not the greatest advice. And so Chris and I are high conflict divorce strategists, and I'm also a state certified domestic violence advocate and a trained crisis counselor. So we kind of fill in those gaps of like, we know that your ex isn't going to be logical, and lawyers are generally trained in logic. So we think about how to negotiate differently when both parties aren't coming to the table and being logical and doing what's best for the kids. We know someone like our client's ex cares about themselves. And so everything has to be approached differently. And that's why we often joke around that our clients all belong to the my lawyer says this is the craziest case they've ever had club, because it doesn't follow the normal cadence of a divorce where things settle down. I mean, there's anger in the beginning and then things settle down and the bills go up and both parties say, okay, we have to do what's best for the kids and get out of here. Ours are the opposite. Ours are the cases that go on for years because there's almost this clinging kind of hate, and the ex cares about punishing. They don't care about resolution. And so I think being able to understand very clearly, just from my own experience, and because we exclusively deal with high conflict cases, to know our audience's what's in their head so well and relate to it, there's a sense of comfort and validation. So back to your original question about what I actually do, we do different things. So we meet with clients virtually, men and women all over the world. We do strategy sessions with them. We teach things like taking strategic oversight of your case, like realizing your case is going to be different. You're going to have to step up more than someone who just says, here, lawyer, take $25,000 retainer and save my life. Like that, it cannot be your life because it matters too much. How to do strategic communication. We have a course called How to Communicate with Your Ex Without Destroying Your Case or Losing Your Mind. And we just do so much with that anyway. That can turn into something called targeted documentation, where often it's hard for our clients to recognize that domestic violence and custody are separate issues, except in very certain situations. So really clarifying like what matters when it comes to custody, because people have a hard time separating the abuse that they've been subject to versus what might happen to their kids in the future. And so, clarifying that is important. Going through what parental alienation means and making sure they're not doing it, and making sure that if their ex is doing it, which often they are doing, making unhealthy statements about our client to their kids, like how to handle that in and out of court, how to present properly to a judge, a custody evaluator, an AFC or attorney for the child, or GAL, a guardian ad litem, things like that, where you're not leading with emotions and coming in with anger and blame, how to negotiate, and again, what to do if your ex is alienating the kids. We have like a whole course, and that's the topic of our book that's coming out in January, called When Your Ex Turns the Kids Against You. So that's what we do in sessions. But one of the things I'm really proud of is what we do on Sundays. It's kind of a client perk. And it's called the Weekly Legal Abuse Support Group. And we blend our male and female clients together because we firmly believe that abuse is a human issue, not a gender issue. And overall, our clients are not only the sweetest people, but they're also super smart and successful. And so we want them to not only develop empathy, but they are awesome at research. And so they bring a lot of resources to the group, but every one of them is dealing with the same ex in a different flavor. So it's important for men and women to come together and really support each other. And in the group, we strategize and we deal with the bigger issues that lawyers don't get involved with, like how are my kids going to be okay? And how do I co-parent with someone who doesn't really care about what's best for the kids, because they often care about hurting me more? So that's where people need a lot of that extra help that they don't know where to turn, because again, therapists are not really specialists in this kind of thing because it is rare, but it affects a huge amount of people. So we do that, and then we have our books that are out, and then this online education program that we started doing called From Fear to Fierce in Family Court. And then we just have a
I love
podcast
that.
and a YouTube channel with lots of free content as well.
Oh, amazing. From fear to fears in family court. No, that is, I love that. So I was just thinking, as you were speaking, like, then some things that were resonating with me. So obviously communication is a big part of that. So how do you work with clients one-on-one in helping teach them how to better communicate? Like how would that look like? Just, and I know it'd be different for,
Yeah.
different clients, but just on a high level.
So the course that we have is about 4.5 hours long, and it goes into all of the detail more than we actually usually cover with clients because they usually come in with different messages and they're freaking out and they're like, look at what my ex is doing. So we like to first start with like, tell us a little bit about what's been happening or what some of those issues are, and then read us some of those communications. And then we kind of give them a slap on the wrist. You could be doing better, even though a lot of them think I'm doing great, it's just not working. And so we'll get into like the three typical ways that your ex responds no matter what you say. That's either with rage, silence, or actually cooperating, which is rare but sometimes happens. And then we start going through how frac, that 4-part system, works, and start tweaking what they're doing. But another perk that we do with our clients is we call it we put them on the permission slip plan, because my background is as a teacher. And so we say, if you're a part of our community, what you can do is, we're going to teach you strategic communication. Like, we'll go through and use some examples, but then we want you to try it, and you can send us what you think you want to say to your ex, and we will proofread and edit it for you, because we want you to have clean hands and we want the record to be clean, knowing about that invisible audience only always. And we don't want you to have the burden of being like, am I saying it right? Am I doing it right? I don't want to get in trouble, which is how everybody feels. And then as you practice, you will learn to do it yourself. And so I love seeing people who really start learning it, because it is the best way to turn around the power dynamic in the relationship. It's amazing. Like, you can see people's faces. We're always on camera, where they hold their breath and they're so scared. And then they start practicing. They're like, oh my gosh, they actually did it. Like, we had a client the other day that we weren't doing frac with specifically, just general, like higher level strategic communication. This is actually, we have a situation where we have two ex-wives from the same person. The second ex-wife referred the first ex-wife. So I'm doing like a tag team thing.
That is crazy.
Yeah. So both
That
of them
is
are
crazy.
really terrified of their ex, because there was domestic violence involved, and they both have children with their ex. And so the ex doesn't see either of the kids regularly, but sort of announces when he's showing up, and both of them freak out and are like, oh my God. And they often try to extinguish whatever it is and act like they can sort of save their children's lives. And I said, why don't we start working on things that your ex has done right, and acknowledge that, and try doing a little ego stroking to start narrowing, or not narrowing down, turning the volume down on the conflict, and not showing you're afraid. But for example, one of them has a teenager, and they got together with the other parent, and the other parent did what the daughter wanted, but then she didn't want to do an overnight, because she hadn't seen her other parent for a long time. And so our client was like really worried about, like, how do I deal with this? And I said, why don't we start with, because the ex couldn't understand why the daughter didn't want to do the overnight, because he's like, I did everything right. Like, why doesn't she want to do what I want,
Yeah.
without considering all the other factors. And so our client really leaned in and said, that was so kind of you for doing what she wanted and for honoring her feelings. And that totally changed the conversation moving forward. And she sent us a
Wow.
copy of it. And I was like, that is amazing. And as we were talking through how to communicate, she said, this is completely not what I would have thought to do, but I feel good. Like, I'm going to try it, and we'll see what happens. And it worked. And I felt so happy. Like, you could just see the difference, because we know the more conflict there is, the more it bleeds onto the kids. So if one person can figure out ways to settle things down, then they become less afraid, because they don't they won't feel that threat of like, if I don't do what this person wants, they're going to attack me or take me to court. It's like, no, we're doing great. And now we have this paper trail of like, we can work together. Look at how well we're getting along. And even if they do take you back to court, to say, Your Honor, look, I mean, I'm sure we can work this out in mediation, because you want to keep that power in your own hands. So that written communication has so many values that people don't even realize. But again, I think it's very empowering to learn how to effectively stand up to a bully without being aggressive.
Amazing. Very, very well said. And it also sounds to me like in the process of doing this, you're actually indirectly helping a person mentally as well. Like I can just almost, because listening to you, you're helping them with their communication, but in the same vein, they're feeling more empowered. They're, I keep this almost that you're providing a sense of relief. So it's almost like your work, not almost, it's like pretty much goes beyond just the communication. It's the communication. You have your paper trail, but I feel like you're having this effect on their life that just goes beyond responding to the other party, and I think that's phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, it's developing that confidence because that person took away so much, and learning to not be frightened of them anymore,
Yeah. Yes.
and to have
Wow.
sense like I can handle this, and to not use AI to do it for you. AI does not work with high conflict
It
situations.
doesn't.
Not. It does not. It's good for some ideas, but this is like really tactical. There's such a human element. So to really understand that ChatGPT is not going to do it for you. And by doing it, you're almost not dealing with the issue, because the issue is your fear. So having robots
That's
communicate
such a
isn't
good point.
addressing
The
your
issue is your
fear.
fear, not so much just the text on the paper. It's
Right.
you taking back control and not being scared and gaining that confidence that I can handle this, right?
Right.
And
Right.
I think it's amazing that you teach that because yes, in the early stages, the default is also to send it to the lawyers, right? So then we would
Money.
communicate. Yes. And I mean, it's great, as we said, for the vast majority of cases that are short term and, things settle down, after a little while, you get a court order, everyone respects it. But for the, you know, consistent court goers are the ones that just would, the kind of high conflict cases we're talking about, that probably you don't want to defer everything to the lawyer because there's probably better uses or there's better ways you could probably use it. Because if they're probably abusing you with the children and in their communication, they're probably trying to get away with ensuring that you're not financially provided for if they have that obligation, right? If they have assets, chances are they're hiding those. So that's where your lawyer might be able to like come in and you could support your lawyers and keep your legal fees lower by learning some of these skills and ultimately taking power back for yourself. Like money aside, even if you have an
Exactly.
unlimited, amount of money to spend on lawyers and legal fees, fantastic. But you also want to take your power back, right?
Right.
So,
And that's part of what I alluded to earlier with the term taking strategic oversight of your case. So our
mhm.
clients have all come out of these relationships where they didn't have any authority. Their ex was the authority in the relationship. And so we don't want them to keep repeating the cycle with their lawyer where it's like, okay, I came from this one relationship where I just believed them and trusted them, and they did everything and took care of the money and all that. And now I'm doing the same thing with my lawyer. We're like, my lawyer knows best. I don't need to pay attention. They're going to handle it. Like that transition period is where you have such an opportunity to learn how to take your life back, to say, you know what, like this lawyer can do certain things for me, but I have to still pay attention because this is my family and my life. And the lawyer can't hold my hand forever. And
Yeah,
it feels really good to be able to learn to do things yourself. These are skills that people can learn instead of, and it should be recognized, like, am I doing the same thing with my lawyer that I did with my ex, where I'm just saying, take care of it for me? No,
yeah,
we can take
yeah,
care of it. You can learn to take care of yourself. You need to learn to take care of yourself because you're a model for your children. And
yeah.
kids do better with parents that keep it together and get stronger and take care of themselves and get whatever help they need to get their confidence back.
Yep, amazing. I think I'm going to stop this here. Lisa, you've given us so much. And thank you, for explaining the crack method, and taking ownership and all of these concepts and ideas. Like, I think anyone listening to this episode already has enough to start working with, but we want them to work with you because these are concepts that we're obviously just discussing on a high level. And they need to just really get in there and do the work. Like, there's really no shortcuts to these things. You just have to go in and do the work. So, Lisa, we will be providing your contact information in the description so that people can find you, work with you, go out there and, get your books, listen to them. I think you're doing amazing work. I really like to talk to, I do a lot of podcasts about, the strictly legal stuff, but I love when I'm able to talk to non-lawyers because, there's a whole, in family law, it's not just about the law. We're dealing with, for some people, it's literally their life in every sense of the way. It covers
Yes.
every area of their life and the anxieties they feel and all of that. My vision for my firm has always been to try and make a person's family life better. And I know that people come to me when things are already broken. And so people wonder, well, isn't it almost contradictory? How can you make things better? And I'm like, no, if I can just make this process even just a little bit better by, having my clients work with people like you that could teach them skills so that maybe when I'm off the file, I've gotten that final order and I've moved on, but my client's anxiety still remains. It would be a thrill for me to know that they're working with someone like you that's helping them on the longer term kind of get their voice back and get their confidence back and whatever other professionals they need to work with to get to where they need to be. And so I'm really thrilled that you were able to join me today and share all of these ideas, Lisa.
No, me too. And Angela, if you want to come onto my podcast and I can interview you on something that's like really important to you. I mean, obviously our audience is only high conflict and people in those extreme situations. But
Yes.
let me know
Oh,
and we
I
can
would
come up with a topic.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Let's do that. Let's do that, Lisa. All right. So we're gonna stop this at this point. And so for the listeners, again, this information would be in the description. Okay. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank